What's happening, guys? Shay here. Uneven bounce. Hope you guys are well. So I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by my very good friend, close and personal friend, John Baldwin, all the way from my home, my ex-hometown of Blackburn in Lancashire. John, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, Chair. How's yourself?
Very good, man. Very good. Really glad to have you on, mate. Obviously, you and me have gone back and forth for close to 20 years now on cricket, so it's good to actually get on camera for once. Maybe it'll keep us in check, I guess, this time, John.
Oh,
So obviously today we're discussing, well, kind of elaborating from our conversations off camera about Owen Morgan, 14th of July 2019. Obviously, England won the World Cup. Owen Morgan hailed as one of the greatest white ball captains of England ever. Incredible performance, obviously, from the team led by himself. Since obviously we're nearly 2 years on, things have changed maybe slightly. John's got certain opinions on the matter, so do I, and I thought it'd be good to kind of get it on camera. So, yeah, as I said, John, before, I'll just leave it to you to kind of take it away. And before I get started, just to introduce John a little bit more, John is obviously a very passionate cricketer, both on and on the field. I always hailed him as kind of the white Courtney Walsh with his bowling action. So, but yeah, really good pace bowler. He can introduce himself and talk about his club at the end of the show, and also a really quite handy middle order batsman as well. He'd probably tell you. But anyway, yeah. So I'll leave it to you now, John. You would take it away and give us your thoughts on Mr. Owen Morgan.
yeah, cheers, mate. Yeah, I love the comparison with Courtney Walsh. That's it's not the first time you've made that one before. I think possibly a notch or two down on the pace gauge, and certainly a hell of a lot less Test wickets than big man from the West Indies. But yeah, so in terms of kind of my own take on the Owen Morgan situation, we've obviously discussed this a lot, certainly in recent times, but pre-World Cup, talking about England's chances and how Morgan was obviously central to that. I think it's certainly even the biggest, Morgan questioner or someone who's never been the biggest fan has got to recognise that since he came in, when Cook was removed at the back end of 2014, and then Bayliss came in the year after, there even if you put the coincidence to one side that England's upturning form happened when Bayliss arrived, you have to recognise that Morgan did a tremendous job in that disjointed squad, very talented squad, but a squad that lost a lot of cricket matches together. Completely different cricket, but I'd liken it in some ways to when kind of Nasser Hussain took over as England captain. It was a bit of a mess, was a real mess, and although Hussain doesn't get the same plaudits that say Michael Vaughan got, I think Hussain kind of came in at a time where England were in a real bad state, and he made England sort of tough to beat. Before then, Michael Vaughan then picked it up and obviously took the really talented Test team onto Ashes glory, etc. Slightly different with Morgan in that Morgan's kind of brand of cricket and expressing himself, etc., has always been about playing fun cricket and going out there and doing the thing. You hear his mantras, don't you, about we'll keep doing what we're good at. This mentality of we'll chase whatever score someone puts on the board, that kind of stuff. You've got to have a lot of respect for that, to be fair, like a lot of respect, because one, it's entertaining, and two, he's very much being kind of his own person. So I just want to sort of set the debate up straight away that there's no sort of anti-Owen Morgan for his sort of entire career. What I would say is that I feel that Owen Morgan, as this kind of middle order supremo, Captain Marvel, sort of master tactician, I think he's massively overstated. In that, I think he's had excellent players around him. I think he had a superb coach that came and took over, and I think his timing of when he came in, you can't kind of ignore that. That being said, I think as me and you have discussed on a number of occasions, I think that 2021 now, post-pandemic, you said to me now, how would you class Owen Morgan's career? You'd have to say he's one of the best white ball captains England have ever had. certainly look at his record. I think he averages mid-40s as captain in ODIs. He averages late 30s overall. So you can see that his own upturn in form, even if you include his massively inflated average against some of the minnows, where he's got his biggest score against Afghanistan. I think I noted down. This even surprised me. Out of his 14 international hundreds, I think 5 of them have come against the minor nations. So he's actually only got 900s in 226 innings against main, test playing one-day international nations. He's got 100 against Canada, Bangladesh, 2 against Ireland, 1 against Afghanistan, which, as entertaining as it was, if you look at his record in that 2019 World Cup, other than the 40 not out against Australia in the semi-final, every knock was a failure. I think he got 9 in the final. I may have got that one right. Fairly bad shot. Good catch by Lockie Ferguson. I think it was a sort of deep cover, deep point. But what I think mine and your debate on this, what it started was, he's like looking deeper into the thing with Morgan, where yes, there is absolutely no doubt this guy has been played in superb innings. This guy has pulled together some really exciting, interesting cricketers and made England into an excellent team. But if you look deeper into the numbers and remove some of the sort of inflated scores against some of these nations, his stats aren't actually that spellbinding. And I think besides his fantastic, I think I made a note here that kind of 2000 and around about sort of the 2019 mark, 2018, 2019 pre-World Cup, did have a really good couple of series. I think there was one against New Zealand, where
away from home.
Away from home, yeah. I think in the T20s, very similar. I think he had a good purple patch a year or so earlier. I would question the year or so earlier. I think he was fairly poor, and then in the lead up to the World Cup itself, and then what's followed, I think there's been some fairly mixed performances, and that's kind of where my debate comes from. I know you've got a lot of opinion on it too, mate. So don't just want to be me constantly talking for the entire time. But my kind of take on it is the guy's 34 years old. He won the World Cup in 2019. We only just won the World Cup, and I don't want to kind of harbour that point too much, because I think I do hate it when people kind of like try and drag down a really successful victory. But if you kind of look at it again a lot deeper, England's lineup and England's performance all the way through, as good as New Zealand were, and they have some fantastic ODI cricketers, New Zealand should never have got that close to England in that final, in my opinion. And actually, in the World Cup, England did have some fairly mediocre times. I remember chatting to another friend of mine who was absolutely convinced that England weren't even going to make the quarterfinals because we had that poor start. But I kind of said, no, I think we will, because I think when we get pushed into a position where we've got to win, I think that's where you'll see how good we are under pressure. And I think that is where Morgan does deserve a lot of credit, because I think he's instilled that almost fearless cricket. And if you've got many talented batsmen, the likes of, I made a few notes of a few people who've really excelled under Morgan. So if you look at the likes of Jason Roy, now let's not debate Roy 20 or ODI. That's for another. That's probably for another debate. But kind of, you look at Jason Roy, he's had really good patches under Morgan. You look at Burstow. Burstow's done really well under Morgan. I think Butler. I was quite surprised when I looked into the details on Butler. I think sort of ODIs. I think he could do a hell of a lot better. And he's someone I'd like to come back to actually with regard to captaincy. But then you liked of Stokes. And then you've obviously got some of the mainstays like a Joe Root, who I would love to come back to a bit later in this. But I think the thing is with Morgan, whilst some of these players have done well, I think whilst he continues to sit in that middle order, and I'm talking ODI as well as T20 here, longer term, I think he's potentially getting in the way of a really, really tidy middle order, particularly in the ODIs. I know myself and you, we were getting quite frustrated when David Milan was obviously coming under a fair bit of criticism in the T20. Rightly so. He'd had a few low scores, but the guy is class. And I think, I might have sent you a WhatsApp that said something along the lines of, the very fact that people are questioning Milan's position in this T20 team when Morgan is still there. If you sort of tell me now, who do you want in the squad, or sorry, in the team? Do you want David Milan or do you want Owen Morgan? Sorry, but it's David Milan every day of the week for me. He is at this moment in time both left-handers, both sort of upper middle order, and I think if you had to choose one of those to get some of the more attacking players further up the order, the likes of Stokes, maybe Billings, people like that, I just don't think there's room for those two in the same team. And I don't want to make this a debate about David Milan or Morgan. This is a debate about Morgan. But I'm just kind of making the point that I think at times I don't want to call it a dynasty, because a dynasty would suggest that Morgan's won loads of things as captain. He hasn't. Remember, he's won a World Cup. Paul Collingwood won a T20 World Cup. He's not being hailed as the second coming in terms of the second coming in Mike Brealey. It's I think that you've got to look at it as Morgan and Bayliss as a duo did fantastic from 2015 right the way through to the 2019 World Cup. Whatever way we won the World Cup, we won it, and it was a superb build up to that, and we got that over the line. There's been many times where England have been on the receiving end of defeats when they've perhaps deserved to win. Sometimes in sport, you kind of don't always get what you deserve. New Zealand in that final were damn unlucky. But I think now, post-pandemic, with this injury in India, seeing how kind of the team looked without him in it, and albeit they lost 3-2 to India, I feel now is a really, really good time to make the break and move on from Morgan.
And that's in the T20s and ODIs, both formats, John?
Both formats.
I mean, that's obviously quite a ballsy statement, I would say that. I mean, for me, there's so much there that's obviously rich content you can go into. I mean, I think that your point on Paul Collingwood is fantastic. I don't think it's ever really mentioned. Paul Collingwood's regarded as a very solid cricketer, wore the three lines on his sleeve, very passionate about his country, led well, but they had clear game plans in that 2010 World Cup. Keys vet at top of the order. Then you had obviously in the bowling attack, you had remember Yardy and Swan as your two spinners, Bresnan, Broad, Collingwood the middle order. They had Kevin Peterson there. Obviously, he was fantastic at tournaments. They had a clear game plan about how to play. It was executed well by Collingwood. A little bit like, and I would say though, the kind of raw quality of that side is not really on par with the 2019 World Cup winning side. I think the likes of Josh Butler, Jofra Archer, Ben Stokes. These guys are, some of the greatest white ball cricketers that I think. Well, Jofra Archer still fairly early on his days, but I think will go on to be one of the best white ball cricketers that England ever had. I don't think Collingwood had that at disposal. Also, Paul Collingwood did it overseas in the West Indies. They played well going into that tournament, but they were, England were knocking over teams consistently for a number of years leading into the tournament. They were the favourites at home, obviously. And I do also wanted to, you have to remember that Trevor Bayliss is coming with a directive to improve the white ball fortunes with Tom Harrison there and Andrew Strauss coming directors cricket. Ironically, Andrew Strauss is the one who led the way to move towards the white ball game and improve that side of things. Because England, they failed so many times in so many tournaments. We got so close, obviously, Champions Trophy a couple of times. Remember, obviously, World Cup '92, in Australia. We got close on numerous occasions. We just couldn't get over the line. Trevor Bayliss came with really high pedigree, he came with tremendous white ball pedigree. That's why he got selected. Granted, he won a couple of Ashes series, but it was ultimately down to one Ashes series, but it was ultimately down to the fact that he was a white ball specialist coach. And I think that also mentioned a lot. I mean, since he's left, I think England's fortunes in the white ball game has been still fairly solid. And we also need to remember, to be fair to Owen Morgan, that England still sit on top of the rankings in
Yeah.
both T20s and ODIs by the skin of their teeth, but just in front of India, about 2 points in both rankings. But they're also number one. My personal opinion with Owen Morgan is that I think my personal opinion that he should probably has enough currency on the base of the World Cup win 2 years ago to lead England in the World Cup this year. I still feel he has enough pedigree there. If I actually look at his record since the World Cup, so July 2019. So his T20 record reads, he's played since then 16 matches, averaging 39.9 versus 29.62 average in the previous 86 matches, before the World Cup. So for me, you look at it and think, well, okay, he's obviously increased his average, very healthily, almost 10 runs an innings over the past 18 months. So you have to give him, kind of credence to that. I think he's done really well. His ODI form slipped off. He's averaging 31.22 in 11 matches since the end of the World Cup. And he was averaging 39.48 before the World Cup in the 232 matches he played previously. Obviously, much bigger data, but I think his ODI form was tailed off, and that's where I would then look at maybe other options. For me, we can go to captaincy options later, but because he's going to be 37 by the time the 2023 World Cup rolls around at the end of in India in 2.5 years' time, he's going to be 37 then. 37. Yeah. And I wonder that maybe they should give him. I think no matter what happens now, he's captain of England in 6 months' time, guaranteed.
Yeah, and I don't. To be honest, Shay, I don't. I'm kind of taking quite a left field, quite an extreme stance to sort of say, right, Morgan's gone now. I don't necessarily mean by the time we're tucking into our cornflakes tomorrow that I want Owen Morgan ousted as captain. But I kind of think there needs to be a succession plan in place for both formats. But I can certainly accept that the T20 side of it, given that the World Cup is coming up fairly soon, and obviously his form in the T20 has been decent in the last couple of years. So my kind of thought process, very similar to what you're suggesting there, is, and this is where, like you said, we can talk about debate later on. But I think when I started to look into sort of other people, and I always love Rob Key's phrase of stats for Prats, and kind of sometimes you can get a little bit carried away in your statistics. So I completely contradict myself and then get buried in statistics. One thing that absolutely flabbergasted me when I was looking, because let's face it, the elephant in the room here is Joe Root. We've discussed Joe Root to death, let's face it. He's England's test captain. He's England's, you could argue that Ben Stokes is England's best player, but he's England's best batsman. I don't think you can find many people to argue that. If you sort of said, right, who is England's best test batsman, you say Joe Root, or you'd probably get a few people who would disagree. So then I sort of just pulled up Joe Root's ODI stats. So Joe Root's ODI stats are 140 innings at an average of 50.1 with 33 50s, 1600s. And of those 1600s, 15 of them have come against the premier international sides, with the other one coming against Bangladesh, and an even split of 100s, exactly half home and half away. So kind of like, and then you look at the strike rate, he's got a strike rate of just under 87 versus Morgan's of 91. So before anyone sort of comes at me saying that, Joe Root can't accelerate, Joe Root can't do this, Morgan's dynamic, blah, 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 all the usual crap to do with kind of Morgan, it's a bit of a fallacy because, yes, Morgan is very, very destructive in those half a dozen innings where he spends his first 20, 25 balls getting to, say, 15, 20, and then suddenly he scored like 40 in like 12 balls. And that's not an exaggeration. That is often the way that Morgan has gone. I just feel that particularly in the one-day format, with the other players that we've got as batsmen, so I'll just throw out names, and we'll have to come back to a few of these, but Roy, Hale, Burstall, Malan, Stokes, Livingston, Billings, you throw those names in there. I just feel that I haven't even mentioned Joe Root in there, and I haven't even mentioned Owen Morgan. Me, for the next World Cup, this is ODI we're talking about, there is more than enough talent there, and almost certainly there will be names that pop up in the next year or two that I'm not putting down there that are going to just spring up from nowhere. I always forget the guy. Oh God, what's my mind's gone blank. The opener who kind of bases himself a little bit on Peterson, the way he kind of plays. God, he played. My mind has gone blank. He's played a few 20. He's played quite a few 2020s in one day for England. Say probably a handful.
Not Tom Banton.
Yeah, so someone like a Banton, like again, you kind of don't know where his career is going to go. You know, is he going to be one that kind of falls away? Is he going to be one that just comes back with a vengeance and he's incredible? But like, I'm just throwing him in as another example. But
definitely, yeah.
I think that these are the players that, for me, we should be bedding in with our next with our kind of next ODI captain. And that doesn't necessarily have to be Joe Root. You know, there's other obvious candidates who may be, someone like a Joss Butler, who knows Ben Stokes in that format of the game. It's not something he's done before, but would Stokes potentially, would his career sort of, go into the stratosphere if he took over as captain? Would it give him a bit more, a bit more to think about that might actually help his game? Is it something that's going to hinder his game? But I just think that when I looked at those stats, particularly on Joe Root, I must admit I nearly fell off my chair, because then I checked his T20 stats. The guy averages 35 in T20s at a strike rate of only 0.5 less than Morgan.
Okay, I was going to ask you strike rate. Yeah, that's so important.
Which is kind of like, when I looked at them, and this is the comment of, stats are for craps, they are. But if you do a direct comparison between the two people as purely as batsmen, Joe Root is in theory, statistically speaking, and looking at who he's had his runs against, how quickly he's get them, he is every bit as good as what kind of Owen Morgan is, and he's currently our Test captain. So if he's currently our Test captain, and we're potentially in a period post World Cup where our captain, like you say, is going to be 37 at the time of the next World Cup, and Joe Root, I think, is 4 years younger than Morgan, so he would be 33 at the next World Cup. For me, he's kind of an obvious choice. Let's not kind of completely divert off the Morgan things. I don't think it's fair just to sort of, it isn't a debate over who's captain, whether or not it's Morgan, Root, Stokes, or whoever else. But the reason that I wrote all those names down on the list is, we've seen Billings play some really good knocks in the various IPL tournaments. We've seen Livingston sort of burst on the scene. He played for Perth Scorchers.
With Jason Roy did very well, actually. Did pretty well.
And he's done really good. I think he took 400 odd runs for them in about 10 or 11 innings. And we all know that opening the batting, you've probably got a few low scores in there in 2020s as well. So to make 400 odd in that many innings is a real good going. And I just feel that, I know we've done it to death on WhatsApp, haven't we? Where we're kind of saying, right, this is the order, and you're like, shit, I've got 5 here to try and fit in, and England have got a real, like, they have got an absolute plethora of talent, of talented sort of middle order batsmen, and I do feel that it's not necessarily you shouldn't be dropping someone because there are other players available. But let's go back to 2005. My old mate Sarian of Bell, which obviously, looking back on it, it possibly was the wrong decision, statistically speaking. But the choice was talking about Peterson. They needed to pick 2 players: Peterson, Thorpe, and Bell. And sort of a few months earlier, Thorpe was nailed on. Really, he was absolutely nailed on to playing that series. And then obviously Peterson burst onto the scene. Bell was always really well thought of within the England setup. Very classy looking player, played all the way through the age groups, and they ended up throwing Thorpe out. I know there was more to Thorpe, that he had a few sort of, he wasn't exactly great with management, quite kind of negative. I think you read a couple of books recently by by various ex-coaches and players, which is kind of mentioned specifically. I think even in Truscothic's book, kind of digs Thor apart a little bit, and he's one of his mates. So kind of they jettison Thorpe, and although Bell only had those 250s in the 2005 Ashes and didn't do particularly well, let's face it, in that series, that was a really, really big call at the time to basically chuck an elite English player. Now, I know at the time England weren't very good. They didn't win many series. But Thorpe, if you sort of mention England players from the 90s, the best ones, you'd probably say Atherton, Stewart, Thorpe, I guess, as batsmen. Sorry to sort of a few of the players who I've not mentioned there, the likes of Gallion and Crawley and the other mediocre players that play. But the point I'm trying to make is, just because someone's done well in the past and just because someone has been a really successful period of time, you don't just keep picking them and playing them. Saying that, I do take the point we've gone the T20, and I think it's a fair one, that because that's coming up in the next few months. What date exactly is that, the T20 World Cup?
So the one in India at the end of the year, I think it's November. It's
November. I thought it was the back end of this year. But
yeah, kind of, before I think I think it's October. It's before the Ashes, because the Ashes in November. I think it's October. Obviously, next year's Australia, and then a year, obviously, the 50 World Cup back in India. That's scheduled for October, November.
And then it's interesting that you've obviously mentioned the Ashes there. I think from a sort of strategy point of view for English cricket, let's just say that I'm appointed head of selectors, or like, right, John, this is kind of your decision now, what you're going to do with England in the next sort of 12 months. To sort of just, let's say, float someone like a Joe Root in, or let's say I dismiss Joe Root from 2020s altogether, and you go with a Ben Stokes or a Joss Butler, and you just jettison Morgan. I think that's potentially very unsettling to do something like that pre the Ashes anyway. And I think that what I would probably suggest is that Owen Morgan very much knows that not necessarily his career is kind of on the line, but this T20 tournament is probably going to be it, in terms of England then have got another few years to the next World Cup, and then another few years to the next T20. And the likelihood of him being captain for those next things at the age of, like you say, 37 and 38, just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But I certainly take your point about the T20s, and I think that it possibly would be a little bit, probably a little bit OTT, just to say, yeah, well done for 2019, Owen, but do you know what? We've got a few good young players coming through, and quite like the idea of Butler or Stokes or Roots or taking over, do one on your bike.
It was said before me, obviously, his T20 form has improved, obviously, over the last couple of years, to be fair to him. But then, like you said before, John, I mean, once you kind of peel back the surface and look at Ashley in detail, the reality is, I think that personally, for me, the 2023 World Cup, Joe Root would be my guy. Personally speaking, he'd be my guy's captain. I just see him as like an absolute shoo-in.
Me too.
Obviously, for the team, I'm not really a fan of Ben Stokes being burdened with the captaincy. I'm not sure about Josh Butler from a tactical point of view. I think Joe would be a great 50 over captain for England going forward. And I think time has to run out. I think Owen Morgan's living on currency. I think if you saw, imagine, let's say tomorrow wake up and the newspapers read Owen Morgan sacked as T20 captain, I think there'll be absolute massive outrage across everywhere. Most people will be like, what is going on? England are ranked number one in both formats. The reigning 50 over champions. Owen Morgan's done a fantastic job. People still class him as a great batsman, which you can argue, obviously, the points we've done today. But for me, obviously, I think irrespective of what we think, I think we know that for a fact that even the games at Sri Lanka, Pakistan this summer, this guy can literally make a duck in every single innings. 100% fact, that guy goes in as captain for that competition. But I do feel that his batting in that competition is important, how well England do. If England flop hard in India in that comp, I would not be surprised if he is removed from captaincy for the next World Cup in Australia. I think they're going to give him the opportunity to become, obviously, obviously to hold concurrently both competition trophies, 50 over and T20. And he'd go down as an ATG, won't he? Let's be honest. He would.
Yeah. And I think that's fair.
You know,
and I think that's fair, mate. I think the idea, but I think let's just say England. I just think let's say England do win the T20 World Cup. Let's say they do. I just personally think that is the point where he should retire and play for cash only.
He might say that. He might say that. He might say, you know
just
what?
become a franchise T20 specialist. Because let's face it, you know, we haven't even debated it, but I've never been a massive fan of people that basically have played for two different countries. I must admit, I've never understood it. You know, I've never understood it right from the days of guy that played for Zimbabwe and then played for South Africa. You remember? Did Kirsten play for Zimbabwe? I'm getting mixed up there. No, Kepler Vessels.
He played for Australia and South Africa.
Australia and South Africa.
South Africa, yeah.
Like, there's obviously a number of players historically who started with a particular team and then come up and then come over. You know, there's a number of.
Lou Ronke played for New Zealand and Australia. Lou Ronke of Australia.
Exactly, and there's some that have been successful, some that haven't been. But kind of the fact that Morgan's come over, he's become English captain. He's done absolutely exceptionally well. He's widely regarded, like you say, and rightly so. He's one of our greatest captains, ever. I think if you put it this way, if he wins the T20, then he is our greatest captain of all time. I think you could argue that in terms of white ball, he is our greatest captain of all time, regardless of that. The fact that the Collingwood T20 win gets kind of overshadowed a little bit is probably just more because I think to win a 50 over cricket tournament, I think there's a little bit less luck involved than what there is in a T20. Having said that, tell that to the New Zealand guys the moment the ball came off Ben Stokes' get four. But you take my point that it's a longer format, more things can kind of go wrong. The way that England kind of played, scoring, high 300s, 400s, not necessarily regularly, but certainly 300 was a poor score. They've kind of, it's not necessarily just England that have, because even before them, Australia were moving the goalposts back in the early 2000s of where them and South Africa had that ludicrous cricket match where nearly 1,000 runs were scored. That was back in 2006. I know that because I was actually in Australia at the time, and I was backpacking and fruit picking, and I actually remember watching that match in a bar in New South Wales, and in Victoria, and it was absolutely incredible. But I think the reason I kind of mentioned that is that the way that Owen Morgan has had England playing and Bayliss has had England playing, it's fantastic. Like it's like watching those games in India where England just kind of play this sort of breathless, fearless, carefree cricket is brilliant, because all sides kind of play in that way. It just makes it so entertaining. And what we kind of want to also remember is that the world goes mad for T20 cricket. And I think there's been a period where people love watching the Ashes. People love watching some of the big series between England and India, perhaps South Africa and Australia in test matches. But then everyone loves the IPL and everyone loves T20s because it's quick, it's there's lots of it. It's easy to watch on television.
Much more palatable, isn't it, really, for the casual fan?
And kind of 50 over cricket, they've revamped it. They've brought different bits in. We'll do middle over power plays, but ultimately it's still a game that lasts for about 6 hours. So it's a lot. For someone who enjoys cricket, try telling it to someone that you can flick on and watch the first hour, and then take your kids out for the day, and then still come back and watch the end of it, and kind of miss the middle bit of kind of the game, and still feel like you've enjoyed it. I don't think I ever told you that when the World Cup final, not the World Cup final, the I think it was the game when Stokes kind of chased down. Yeah, when Stokes chased down that score against Australia, where they were 9 down. I watched the whole morning and then took the kids to the park, I think, at the point where Joss Butler was in. And I think I spent around about an hour and a half at the park, and then was still able to come back. And I arrived back just as we'd gone 9 down. So like cricket's one of those wacky sports, isn't it, where you can kind of actually have a day out and still manage to catch the main part of the game live. And I think this is the difference between 20 cricket and ODIs, where Morgan has actually made. It's not just Morgan; it is Bayliss. It's probably the birth of T20 cricket. It's the IPL. There's lots of factors, but English ODI cricket is actually really, really exciting to watch. Like I was glued to that 5 match series in India. If I'm honest, like the amount of sort of times that.
The ODIs is 3, wasn't it? ODIs is 3. The T20s is 5.
Sorry, 3. Yeah, sorry, the three ODIs, and I was glued to the 5 match T20s. But the
2 best sides in the world are going at it basically.
Those ODI matches, like England threw away that first one.
Yeah.
But the other 2 games, I think I said to you after England, probably messaged you to say that, you know what, even though England lost, I actually felt our performance in that deciding game had so many positives in there. The fact that we fell really well short on a number of parts of our game, yet we still pushed the other best team in the world in their own conditions.
Yeah.
Like, right to the end. Like, it was just a cracking series. And I think Morgan, like, I don't want this to don't want this to be a Morgan hating video, far from it. But I do just feel that people, if we're not careful, people will get carried away with giving him months and then years of credit for 2019. And he'll be allowed to sort of sit in and stop the development of the next winning captain, winning squad, winning team. And that's not what for example, the great Australian teams of the past did.
Yeah, I know you're right.
You know,
but are we
don't rest on your laurels.
Are we cutthroat to do that? I really think they're doing this. Not saying it's not sentimental, because obviously England's still number 1. He's played on T20s, but I do believe after this World Cup, he'll be more scrutinised than he is currently. I think right now you can not say do no wrong, but he's pretty much untouchable. But that Stardust is going to wane for sure. If he flops at the World Cup, personally, and England don't play well in particular and get knocked out, let's say in the quarterfinals or something, the groups or even the group stage, even worse. Let's say they have a bad semi or something like that. They don't perform to best ability. And he's great through the games. And then, but even if he does pretty well himself personally, I still believe he might. I think he actually might retire. To be honest, I think
I think that. I think that would be.
That's also on the table. I think it's on the table because he loves playing franchise cricket around the world. He loves it. He was last week on the pod with on Sky Sports podcast.
We've managed to kind of talk all the way through for this amount of time, and we haven't even kind of touched upon kind of the personality of Morgan. Well, we've touched upon it a little bit, but kind of you just mentioned a point that I was going to raise, that like you remember when the whole sort of KP thing happened, that kind of like Morgan was always the guy that kind of Peterson said kind of, we need a captain like Morgan. Morgan's a fantastic guy. He understands people, that, the other. Well, of course, Peterson was going to say that because Peterson was very much like, he was probably one of the original franchise cricketers. Like he was the way the cricketing world is now. I've seen him interviewed recently where he kind of said, geez, if we could go back kind of 6-7 years ago to the way the world is now, cricket-wise, like everything was great, because kind of what Peterson was arguing back then, a lot of cricketers are kind of half getting away with, where they're choosing their games, they're kind of picking and choosing a little bit. And I think Morgan has always understood the sort of the opportunities that are out there for these I want to say sort of blockbuster cricketers, these guys that, yes, they might be decent test match cricketers, yes, they could be decent guy players. And I'm just going to throw a couple of names out there, likes of like an Andre Russell, Kieran Pollard, people like that, who and obviously
Dwayne Bravo,
Dwayne Bravo, guys who were good cricketers, but basically have been able to, again, my favourite phrase, play for cash only by just travelling the world.
Mercenaries.
mercenary. Yeah,
Andre Russell in particular, absolute scum mercenary,
yeah,
scumbag. No, scumbag.
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember West Indies are busting a nut in New Zealand, getting trounced,
yeah.
and this motherfucker's playing in Sri Lanka, just playing for cash only. Fucking scumbag mercenary. That's what he
I
is,
think,
straight up. He don't give a
but
fuck.
this, but
Karen
this is,
Paul,
yeah,
fair play to Pollard. He's took over the
yeah,
captains, we know.
yeah,
White ball captaincy. He's done a really good job. He's binding the team together. He cares. He is
yeah,
obviously very much about cash only, but he
yeah,
does
yeah,
care about West Indies cricket. I'm not. You see Andre Russell. Andre Russell will make himself available. You will see about a month before the World Cup's about to start, especially to
yeah,
India, because his sponsors are one to play in that
yeah.
tournament in India. Fact.
You're right, mate.
And so he'll all of a sudden, oh, my knee's better. I'm fully fit. I want to play for it. I love the West Indies. It's fucking bullshit. It's
Yeah,
just it's
I
all
think
about the cash. That
I
guy is
agree.
one of the worst in the domestic in the international scene.
And I think, as much as me and you are having this debate now, I genuinely think that this kind of conversation, not about cash only, but this kind of conversation, kind of with Morgan, because I think they have this open debate. I think Morgan will already have exit plan post T20. Like, I don't even think will be in his mind to defend the next 50 over World Cup.
Yeah,
The
I think
sole
everything
reason,
will have to go perfectly for that to happen.
yeah,
Everything.
I think if we have an absolutely outrageously good T20, and let's say his form in the ODIs is just outrageous, which by the way it won't be. It won't be. I absolutely.
Yeah.
It just isn't happening because he's. I question whether he's ever been that good. I think the
Yeah.
statistics prove it. I genuinely don't think. I think he's been a really good player, but I don't think he's ever been more than that. But I don't think that'll happen because previous kind of doesn't. But if it did, I think perhaps he'd stay in. But I think his dream is probably he's got the World Cup win in 2019. He'll hopefully get the World Cup T20 World Cup win in 2021, and there he sails off into the sunset, and he plays every single global franchise T20 thing going from
Yeah. Definitely.
Madrid to playing in Pakistan, India, South Africa, West Indies, everywhere, and then he probably retires maybe from most of those formats 12, 18 months later, perhaps plays another IPL just because it's a little bit more famous and there's more cash in it. Let's face it, because let's face it, Owen Morgan retires from playing international cricket, still plays, still available for IPLs in the same way that Peterson was at that stage at the end of his career. Someone within the IPL will buy him for a decent amount of cash and install him as their captain. Like, there is just absolutely no doubt that will happen. You've referred a couple of times to he's playing off credit. He's always going to have credit of he turned England. Whether or not this is true, he turned England from a shit white ball cricket team into a World Cup winning team in 4 years. And reality is, he didn't do that alone. But you can't argue with the facts. He's the only English captain to ever win the 50 over, World Cup.
Everything went just was fell into place. The maturity of those key players, they brought in and ushered a new era, a new brand of cricket. Joe Bills was a massive part of that. Ben Stokes came to 2015. Ben Stokes still smashed his hand through remember in the West Indies. He smashed his hand through the window and broke his hand. He was a little bit of a tearaway. He started to mature, obviously, after what happened. Obviously, he got better. Josh Butler was 24, 25 years old. He improved. Jason Roy started coming through. Then you also had the complete dropping of Broad Anderson, like no more. Chris Wilkes came through. Adil Rashid, Moeen Ali, all these guys came through at that time. And so obviously, and then Johnny Bairstow, etc. So everyone seemed, because if you look at all the ages of these players, they're all around the same age, 89, 90, 91, they're born, roughly speaking, or around that same age. It was kind of the perfect storm that kind of worked in hand with Bayliss and Morgan.
Look at what you just mentioned there about like Broad and Anderson. Like, I must admit that had kind of gone out of my head, but that's another key thing. Like, his man management, or certainly the way that Bayliss was kind of able to come in with this kind of almost clean slate of, yes, we've had these guys in before, and yes, they've got 100 wickets apiece in ODIs and whatever else. Who cares about that? It's not about statistics of how many wickets they've got away. This is the brand that we're going to try and play.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not going to fit into this because the way that you need to bowl in ODIs is this way, and these are the cricketers that we're going to use. The likes of Liam Plunkett, David Willey, people like that.
Yeah, those guys. I forgot, but yeah, Liam Plunkett, massive part of it. Yeah,
and they kind of made that team and that squad very. You mentioned before about Paul Collingwood and the England setup had a really structured way of winning cricket matches.
Definitely.
They won that World Cup, and that is exactly what Bayliss and Morgan have got. But all I would say is it's even more of an argument for why the transition, let's say, to a Joe Root should be even easier, because Joe Root is kind of in and around that environment anyway. Because if anything, a lot of the T20 and ODI form and success of the ODIs and the brand and the way we're playing has actually passed through to some of the Test cricket that England have been playing.
Yeah.
Some of it bad, some of it actually negative, which I think is probably for another pod. But kind of, I think maybe we shouldn't use the word remove Morgan, but kind of, if Morgan does bow out at the end of the T20, I do think that would be that'd be a real positive for England going forward to the next tournament.
And the good thing is that Root and Silver would already have a relationship anyway. First of all, both Yorkshiremen, and obviously from the Test arena, they've got a strong relationship already that's been built. So it would just be a seamless transition to the 50-over format, if not T20. John, we'll wrap up there, but I think one more point I want to bring up was we have one question. Obviously, it's, the other elephant in the room is obviously Mr. Alex Hales. So Rajiv, who's been on this channel numerous times.
Hi, Rajiv. How you doing?
So Rajiv also posed a question before about should Morgan welcome back Hales. What's your opinion on that, John, before we go?
Well, my personal opinion on it is yes. I think if you just look at it, there's quite a lot of history there. But if you said to me now, I'm in Owen Morgan's position, do I want Alex Hales back in that team, particularly the 2020s? So particularly that kind of 2020 opening batting slot, which I felt that kind of Roy looked quite out of his depth. I know he got a few 40s, but for me, he was very, very hit and miss in those games where he needed to sort of accelerate quickly. So if I'm in Morgan's position now, you basically, Alex Hales, he's fit, he's ready to play, he's given assurances that basically anything that kind of has gone before has gone, and he's excited to play for England again, and he can buy into the culture. Then yes, my question would more be is that what I don't get about the Morgan and Hales thing is Morgan was always a big advocate of Peterson's reintegration, and he always spoke about bringing these kind of blockbuster cricketers into the fore and allowing them to sort of express themselves and express. Sometimes they'd do things which weren't particularly great, but it was up to the management team to keep them on the straight and narrow. Let's face it, Ben Stokes has been far from perfect. Obviously, Peterson before has been far from perfect. There's been numerous other people that haven't. Now, Hales has obviously, quite a number of misdemeanors, but as far as I'm concerned, he's kind of served his time of being out of the squad and being out of the team. Has he shown remorse? Well, from what I can see, he's apologised. He's reached out to actually to be allowed back into the team and to the setup
with no reply. With no
reply from Morgan, and that's the bit I don't get. And I feel that this is where there's obviously something personal between Morgan and Hales, in that for Morgan to not respond, Morgan feels very let down from Hales, and fair play. In terms of if I was Morgan, I'd feel let down as well, because Hales was a big part of his setup, and obviously he stepped out of line and he was punished. But Morgan is this kind of captain, man manager, reintegrator, and all this sort of stuff. for me, this is a perfect example of where you bring Hales back on board. Or on the flip side, and this isn't what I would do, but if you don't want him back, excuse my French, but fucking tell him.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of like, end the guy's career, end the guy's international career so that at least he knows. Because I think what's happening at the moment, I think it's just downright unfair. We've got a good run now through to the T20 World Cup, 6 months. Now is the absolute time to get this guy back in, or to stamp it out and just say, sorry, Alex, you've let us down too many times, like they eventually did with Peterson, where they just said, oh, you're
Enough's
done,
enough. Yeah.
enough's enough. But I just feel that the Peterson and Hales situations are totally different in the sense that Hales has obviously stepped out of line. He's actually served a punishment and a ban, and now sort of gone away, proven himself in a few of these tournaments where he's clearly scoring plenty of runs. And I just think that it's just very simple, isn't it, for Morgan to say yes, you're back on board, or at least give the guy the common courtesy to say we've had a chat internally and no. Just out of interest, what's your thoughts, Shay?
I concur with you there, John. I think
Yeah.
I discussed this before. I sent my Instagram post a few weeks ago. To me, listen, if you're not going to pick the guy, fair enough, but just let the guy know. Stop letting stop keeping his career on your string. You like playing.
Yeah, that's good terminology. I think it's
really unfair. I think it's really unfair. I think, listen, I mean, I listened to an interview with him on Sky Sports pod about a month ago with David Lloyd, with Bumble, and he said that he's reached out to Owen Morgan in a response. He didn't say, he said he's really disappointed about what he did. Listen, man, the guy did a little bit of beak. You know what I mean? That's what happened.
Yeah.
He didn't go and kill anyone. He didn't go and smash any one in the face. He didn't go beat up a guy outside a nightclub. Do you know what I mean? The guy served his time. I mean, Ben Stokes has done a lot worse. We know that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a fact. But I think the reasons why Owen Morgan's playing Marta is because he knows he's got a plethora of top white ball options at the top of the order, with the guys I mentioned before. So I honestly believe that his ego's a bit out of control with this one. And I feel like if he didn't have obviously people like Bairstow, Butler and Jason Roy, etc., in Milan, even Tom Badson lurking in the background, Phil Salt, all around there, I feel like he had all these options available to him. He might have let Alex Hales back into the fold, but because he knows he doesn't need them, he's sitting on that kind of that podium of being the World Cup winner. I just feel like it's the moment. It's whatever I want, I get. That's what.
And I think,
I
think your point you made there is an excellent one in terms of I think that is the way it will go. Because person's name you haven't even mentioned there, and I'm only mentioning because he's a Lancastrian from Barrow, which is where my grandparents actually ended up moving up to sunny Walney Island in the last 20 years of their lives. But Liam Livingstone.
I thought you were going to say that, yeah.
And kind of the thing is with Liam Livingstone is, I think I've debated this with you before, that we discussed, like, for example, Jason Roy and Hales. If you kind of just accept that Bairstow is opening, say in the ODIs, and let's say Butler's opening in the T20s. So let's say those two spots are nailed down. I'm not sure if they are, but let's just say they are. The argument of it, so you've got to basically find another batsman to open with them. I think I made the point to you that the thing is with Roy, in ODIs, Roy has got that kind of, he always looks really dodgy early on, even though he's quite elegant when he plays these nice shots. He just looks dodgy, and he does things that look quite rash, and he can look quite sort of ugly for an elegant cricketer. Whereas Hales is just like to a certain extent, and I mean this with the greatest respect to him, like a glorified baseball player. He's just good at hitting the ball out of the ground. Like, in terms of, he sees ball, he hits ball. He's very uncomplicated foot movement, very uncomplicated back lift, very uncomplicated follow through. It's all about timing of see ball, hit ball. I think in T20s, the format is just absolutely made for him. He's also good. He's a good ODI player as well. But I'm kind of totally made for him in the T20s. But by the same token, point you make about the plethora of talent that Morgan's kind of got at his disposal, playing kind of devil's advocate, is that what's to say that Liam Livingstone, just to pick him out as an example, albeit a very unproven one, but the way he kind of plays as well is very, very similar to an Alex Hales, albeit I think he's got a little bit more. He's a little bit more technically correct in terms of on the eye than perhaps Hales is. He's another similar player that he's just about hitting the ball out of the ground. You know, he's constantly. If you see the amount of range hitting he's doing, and you see some of the stuff that he's doing with Lancashire, it's incredible. Like, so perhaps it's just a case of similar to when England binned off Peterson in the from all formats of cricket. I think that at the time, whilst England struggled for a little while, they did it safe in the knowledge that they still had a lot of really, really good cricketers. And it was kind of like almost two fingers up to Peterson, because they knew they had Stokes coming through eventually. They had Joe Root, obviously Cook, Alex Hales, Cook. You know, these guys were quality players. So they thought, well, yes, Peterson has been an absolute world beater for us. But at the time, Peterson was kind of on the slide, like he was, let's face it. So they kind of binned him off because he was a problem. And I think with Hales, the thought process is Alex Hales that much better than everyone else that he's a certainty? And I think the answer is probably no. But personally speaking, would I bring him back on board? Yes, because I think he makes England's squads better than what they currently are.
2020, yeah. Okay. John, we'll wrap up there. Thanks very much. Really
no worries, mate.
Really good, interesting opinions there, John, as always. And I think it's very much, I would say, against general consensus. It's an alternative view to what the mainstream are thinking right now. So it's good to discuss this stuff and just kind of give an alternative viewpoint, because I think there's some valid content there that we discussed there, and there's an argument to say that, yes, to look at the other side of the coin, if it maybe Owen Morgan shouldn't be leading England anymore, at least not in the medium term anyway. But I appreciate it, John. John, do you want to give a little bit of background yourself? Obviously, where do you find you? Who do you play for, etc.? What's your cricketing background?
Yeah, currently playing in the Ribblesdale League for Cherry Tree, which was my kind of boyhood club. Had a few seasons where I played for a club called Oztwistle Emmanuel. And a reasonably successful stint there. Really fun few years. But played the 2019 season, Tree, 2020, albeit it was a couple of games because of obviously the pandemic and injury. But hopefully starting to get myself sort of fit and raring to go for the new season. It should, I think, start on time. The lads have played friendly last weekend, and I've got some more friendlies this weekend. And our first game is on Saturday, the 17th of April. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it, mate. So hopefully the weather starts to a bit. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems to be as cold as what it was in January.
It's a bit nippy, but it's bloody nippy, man. I tell you, it's windy as hell outside where we are down south. But hopefully we'll warm up.
It'd be interesting to see what some of your regular. I'd be really interested to see what some of your regular subscribers sort of think on the sort of the Morgan debate, because it's not a closed book, and although my opinions probably are fairly strong in terms of suggesting pinning him off completely. I think there's probably a happy medium in terms of what a lot of people may think when they look deeper into the stats and the potential future medium term.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll try to hopefully get some more views on it as well after the live stream is obviously finished now. It's quite late as well, isn't it? So a few people come in the chat and stuff, so that's good. But we'll get more views over the next couple of days, so hopefully get some comments as well. All right, John, we'll take good for the season, man. Next Saturday.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Speak to you soon.
We'll speak soon. Cheers. Thanks, John.
Yeah, cheers, buddy. Bye.
Bye. So that was John Bolden there, John Bolden 82 on Instagram. Thanks very much for my mate coming on. Really enjoyed that. Really very much. Said giving an alternative opinion on Owen Morgan and whether he should still remain as captain. So yeah, interesting conversation as always with John. But yeah, if you like the content, guys, I always say do please like, comment, subscribe. Get a few new subscribers recently, so that's been great. I want to keep on going, try and get more content there as well now with the IPL weekly show, the IPL Catty show. That's going to be every Sunday with the guys I had on yesterday, Anurag, Sion, Krisha, etc. And I'll be doing, I've got a few videos still to upload. One on David Miller, I've been saying for ages, but I need to get edited and uploaded. I've got some thoughts on certain plays currently in around the England setup. I want to do a video on Ollie Pope and on Tom Curran in particular. And yeah, just get some more live streams going. And I'm going to try and bag into as well, or I can for the next few weeks. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I'll leave it there, guys. As I said before, enjoy the content. Please do, like, comment, subscribe. So it's quite late now. It's like 11:10. I'm pretty knackered. But anyway, I'll leave it there, and hopefully I will see you next time. All right, take care.